Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are opening up a case file that, well, it didn't just capture attention. It really became this global symbol of zero-tolerance zones, media mania, and that really volatile relationship between justice and, nationality.
Absolutely.
We're doing a deep dive into the Schapelle Corby international cannabis trafficking case.
And it's quite a story.
Yeah, our sources show how it went from just a routine customs check to, well, a full-blown political crisis, and all centered around this one 27-year-old traveler and her bodyboard bag.
That bag. It's iconic in a way.
It really is. So our mission today, let's try and get beyond those headlines. How did this one item, this bodyboard bag, become the absolute flashpoint for this legal and cultural earthquake, one that genuinely changed airport security and, strained ties between Australia and Indonesia for basically a generation?
It's such a remarkable story because, as you say, it's a brutal case study. It shows exactly what happens when someone used to one legal system, where the defense gets a lot of weight, suddenly lands in a place with a completely different approach, especially one with zero tolerance for drugs.
Oh.
And that collision, it just revealed this deep vulnerability in cross-border travel. Few other cases really show it quite like this one.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Let's start right at that moment, the chaotic beginning.
Yeah.
October 2004, Schapelle Corby, young woman, heading to Bali for a holiday. Lands in Denpasar. Customs pulls her bodyboard bag off the carousel. Standard check, you'd think. Nobody had any idea they were about to detonate a diplomatic bomb.
Right. And the specifics of what they found, that's just central to everything that followed.
Yeah.
The customs officer unzips the bag, and there it is. 4.1 kilograms of cannabis hidden inside.
4.1 kilos. I mean, just to give you a sense of scale,
it's huge.
It's a way beyond anything like personal use.
Oh, absolutely. That quantity immediately puts it into the serious trafficking category under Indonesian law, no question.
And her reaction at that moment, it was barely defining. Reports say she immediately broke down, swore she knew nothing about it, just total panic. And that set up her core defense, the one she stuck to the whole time.
Yeah.
The drugs weren't hers. They must have been planted.
Yeah.
Somewhere between check-in in Australia and landing in Bali.
And right there, that's where you see the immediate clash, the procedural conflict that really shaped the whole legal battle.
Oh, so?
Well, the prosecution wasn't just saying she had drugs. They specifically claimed she intentionally imported Aussie Hydro.
Aussie Hydro.
Yeah, that term is really critical. It implies high-grade, hydroponically grown cannabis from Australia. Very specific.
Okay.
So by using that term, the prosecution was building a case that she brought a valuable premium product into Indonesia to sell. It directly attacked any idea that it was just some random bag contamination.
Right, undermining the planted theory from the get-go.
Exactly.
But the defense, they needed to fight that specific claim, right? Sources say they immediately asked for forensic tests.
They did. They asked for origin tests on the cannabis itself to prove it wasn't this Aussie Hydro. And also for fingerprint tests on the packaging. Who actually handled this stuff?
Seems like standard procedure, doesn't it?
Well, standard in maybe a Western adversarial system, yes.
Yep.
But these requests were pretty much blocked almost immediately by the Indonesian authorities.
Blocked? Wow.
Yeah. And that raises a huge question, right? If you block basic forensic tests that could potentially back up the defense's only real argument, what does that signal about fairness?
Right.
In the Indonesian system, which is more inquisitorial, the judge leads the investigation. The defense just has much less power to force these kinds of investigative steps compared to the state.
So that procedural stonewalling, I guess, it meant the trial was always going to be this massive clash. It ran from January to May 2005, Denpasar District Court.
And the courtroom itself, one source called it a global stage, which feels pretty accurate.
Yeah, you can imagine.
And it was a stage operating under Indonesian law. Very different. No jury. 3 judges making the final call.
3 judges, no jury.
Right. And unlike, say, the U.S. or Australian system where the prosecution carries a heavy burden and the defense is really active, the Indonesian system leans heavily on that judicial investigation. And then you had cameras everywhere just amplifying it all, broadcasting these procedural differences live around the world.
And that difference in process just got magnified by this media meltdown. It turned into something like national theater, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
In Australia, the reaction was, well, fiercely supportive for her. tabloids running daily countdowns.
Yeah, the countdowns.
Much of the public seemed convinced she was a martyr, a victim of some kind of conspiracy.
But then you look at the flip side. In Indonesia, and really globally outside Australia,
Right.
the view was totally different. The media, the public there, they largely saw her as maybe a privileged foreigner trying to get special treatment, disrespecting their strict laws.
So disrespect for their sovereignty.
Yeah, and maybe an assumption of Western superiority, some felt. The whole thing became what one analyst called a diplomatic Rorschach test.
A Rorschach test.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, people weren't really looking at the evidence. They saw either a victim or a smuggler, and it depended almost entirely on which country's narrative you bought into. It was like cultural projection, completely overriding any kind of factual analysis.
And that intense cultural projection was about to slam right into the reality of Indonesia's zero-tolerance drug laws.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the climax. May 27, 2005. Verdict Day.
Yeah. For anyone watching, and millions were, it was a genuinely shocking moment, though maybe predictable given those procedural issues we talked about. Judge Linton Surrate declared her legally and convincingly guilty.
Legally and convincingly guilty. And the sentence...
20 years. 20 years in prison.
We should probably pause there. I mean, drug trafficking in Indonesia, it can carry the death penalty. It's a very real possibility. So 20 years. It's horrifying, obviously.
Yeah.
But for her legal team, for Corbyn, maybe it felt like a heavy sentence and somehow a narrow escape from, well, the ultimate penalty.
That's a fair point. It was severe, but not the maximum. The reaction, though, it was just visceral, immediate. You had Australians literally crying in the streets back home.
Yeah, I remember seeing that.
Well, at the same time, you had crowds in Jakarta demanding harsher punishment. It just showed how deep that divide was. Totally unbridgeable.
And her screams in the courtroom, sources noted they were just looped on global TV.
Instantly making her probably one of the most polarizing figures of that decade.
What's really crucial, I think, is how that intensity, that fear, jumped right out of the TV and into, well, physical reality. This case didn't just end in court. It actually changed how people thought about their luggage.
You're talking about the bag tamper panic.
Exactly.
Yeah, before Corby's case blew up like that, the idea of an innocent person having drugs planted in their checked bags, it seemed like something out of a movie.
Right, maybe fiction.
After Corbyn, it felt terrifyingly real to a lot of travelers.
And that fear, it literally became a business. Those plastic-wrapped kiosks you see everywhere at airports now.
Wrapping luggage, yeah.
They really emerged widely because of this case. The paranoia sparked by this bust and the media coverage, people wanted that visible layer of security. It was a direct result.
A physical manifestation of that fear, definitely. And back in Australia, that fear wasn't entirely unfounded, was it? The panic forced Australia to look at its own airport security.
Oh, right.
Canberra had to tighten things up after investigators uncovered these, what they called Sydney handler rings.
Okay, Sydney handler rings. We can't just leave that term hanging. What exactly were they, and why were they so significant for the Corbyn story?
Right. So these handler rings referred to proven instances of corrupt airport baggage handlers and ground staff at Sydney Airport, which was Corby's departure point.
Okay, so confirmed corruption.
Confirmed corruption, yes. Their exposure proved that, actually, organized crime could use passenger luggage to move illegal goods through the system without the passenger knowing.
Wow.
Now, this confirmation came after her verdict, but it gave huge retrospective weight to that planted theory in the eyes of the Australian public. It just fed that permanent sense of ambiguity surrounding the case.
So the case moves beyond airport security, lands squarely in government territory. Australian Prime Minister at the time, John Howard, he was put in a really tough spot diplomatically.
Oh, incredibly difficult. Walking a political tightrope is exactly right.
Yeah.
He had to balance this overwhelming sympathy at home. I mean, his voters were demanding action with the absolute necessity of respecting sovereignty abroad.
You can't just interfere.
You just can't. You can't publicly pressure or dictate to a sovereign nation like Indonesia, especially given the sometimes sensitive history between the two countries. Every single word had to be incredibly careful to avoid making things even worse.
But even if Howard couldn't directly challenge the verdict, the Corby saga did lead to some actual policy changes, didn't it?
It did. Sources point out that the sheer pressure from this case actually sped up prisoner transfer talks between Australia and Indonesia.
Ah, okay.
Which created a really critical framework that well, became essential pretty quickly afterward.
Why essential?
Because that framework was needed almost immediately. The Corby trial was kind of a dark foreshadowing of the Bali 9 drug trials, which came later and were arguably even higher profile.
Right. The Bali 9, higher stakes there too.
Much higher stakes, yeah. So that diplomatic dance they learned during the Corbin case, it was directly applicable to that next, even more severe crisis.
What's really fascinating, though, is this sort of irreversible legal step that happened a bit later, which basically cemented that ambiguity forever, that legacy of doubt we mentioned.
That's right. In 2006, Indonesia's Supreme Court issued a final order. The drugs found in the bag, and crucially, the bodyboard bag itself, the key piece of evidence, they were to be destroyed.
Destroyed. Yeah. So, no chance of retesting later.
None. It meant any possibility of maybe later more advanced forensic testing, things like sophisticated DNA analysis that might not have been available or done initially, that possibility was just deliberately and permanently eliminated.
So it doesn't matter if you think she was guilty or innocent.
Exactly.
The fact that definitive forensic proof wasn't established, first because tests were blocked, and then because the evidence itself was destroyed, it just means those procedural questions will always hang over the case.
Precisely. For those who believe she was innocent, destroying the evidence just, etched that uncertainty into history forever. It confirmed, for critics, the sort of procedural opacity they felt was there all along. It meant the case could never really be closed in the public's mind.
Well, regardless of guilt or innocence, Schapelle Corby served her time. She got parole in 2014, but had to stay in Bali under his condition.
Right. Couldn't leave Indonesia yet.
Her final act in this whole saga, really, was her deportation.
Yeah.
May 27, 2017, exactly 12 years to the day after her conviction. Flew back to Brisbane under this just intense, almost hysterical media spotlight.
And she's kept the story alive, hasn't she? Through memoirs.
Yeah, she has. My Story in 2006, an update in 2019, and then retitled No More Tomorrows for 2024.
Yeah.
She's actively managed her narrative.
And her continued visibility just underlines that ultimate takeaway from the sources. The Schapelle Corby saga was genuinely a defining event, a powerful symbol of that deep legal culture clash, the chilling reality of zero-tolerance enforcement overseas, and maybe most of all, the incredible power of media spectacle to turn one legal case into this global, decades-long phenomenon that almost transcends the actual facts of the crime.
So to sum it up, that one bodyboard bag, the 4.1 kilos inside, it fundamentally shifted global travel behavior. It exposed real vulnerabilities in airline security. It definitely strained a critical diplomatic relationship.
Absolutely.
And it gave us all this really stark look at the limits of cross-border justice when two legal systems just fundamentally disagree on basic procedures.
So what's the takeaway for you, the listener? Maybe consider this final thought. We know the global media frenzy immediately framed this as Australia versus Indonesia, a nationalistic thing.
Right.
We know key forensic tests were blocked early on, and the physical evidence was later destroyed forever. So how does a case like this permanently affect public trust? Trust in the fairness of justice when you cross borders. Does it matter what the actual guilt or innocence was if the process itself leaves such a huge shadow of doubt?
A shadow that maybe no verdict can ever fully erase.
Exactly. It shows that sometimes procedural failure can create that permanent doubt.